Yes, it's me. Like to this video, subscribe to my channel, and let's start.
My name is Kanako Hata. The wind swayed through the trees and ruffled the long grass of the clearing. It blew the sweet smell of a past storm that had shed its tears on the forest below. The scent, flowers and fresh plantation soared on the breeze, giving the air a hint of the summer that was soon upon them. I am the firstborn of the Hata family, and as so, it is my duty to help protect them. A herd of deer grazed in the clearing, ears flicking back and forth, seemingly ignorant. One lone buck, standing farther off from the others, raised his head and glanced off towards the tree line. But alas, I can't protect them from everything. In a tree, about 90 degrees from the way the buck was looking, the pale hands of a young girl pulled back the string of her bow, arrow nocked and ready. This is the story. She narrowed her dark blue eyes, shadowed by the leaves of the tree, and held stock still. Of how I became strong enough to protect everyone I care about. There was a loud crack, and the deer bolted off. Are we there yet, Kakashi-sensei? My answer from 5 minutes ago has not changed, Naruto. Not yet. The loud whine that was followed by the exasperated voice echoed down the pathway as a small group of 4 people made their way towards some destination. At the small blond boy with a grumpy look and whisker markings on his face, crossed his arms behind his head. But I'm hungry. His complaint was met with a punch to the head by the pinkett who was traveling behind him. Shut your trap, Naruto. Can't you be at least a little sensible? We are on a mission here, idiot. The blonde rubbed his head and groaned in pain. Geez, Sakura, calm down. We only need to catch this lame bandit and go back home. Plus, at this, the blonde's stomach let out a gurgle. I'm starving. The young girl, Sakura, clenched her fist and shot a furious glare towards Naruto. Behind the two, the boy with raven hair sighed. They were extremely annoying. Both of them. Sasuke glanced at the blonde. Naruto was loud, overly energetic, and wouldn't shut up. He then looked over at the pinkett. Sakura was also loud, but she doted on him every chance she got. They were more than annoying. They were unbearable. Sakura has a point, Naruto. Glancing behind him, Sasuke watched as his sensei walked up beside him. His gravity-defying, silver hair and ridiculous orange book just seemed to annoy him more. At least his sensei was bearable. These people have been subject to kidnappings and thievery thanks to this bandit, and apparently the feudal lord of this land doesn't seem to have enough manpower to them help, since they're only an outer-lying village with not much to provide. Whatever his teacher was going to say next, Sasuke ignored. It was the same thing over and over again. Naruto and Sakura got in a fight, their sensei lectured them a boo. Sasuke was left to his own musings. Looking around, the ravenet narrowed his eyes. They should be going. Who knows how far this village was, and to make matters woe, they were wasting time. I could be training right about now, he thought to himself, while glancing up at the sun. Apparently, it was almost noon and they had missed breakfast. He had to admit, with some resentment, that he was hungry. Then his eyes spotted something to the left. Oi, Kakashi. The silver-haired man turned to glance at his student with one tired eye, the other covered by his headband. What is it, Sasuke? The boy pointed above the trees. I see smoke. It could be our village we are looking for, he said while managing to keep his voice level. If that was a village, he would be able to get away from his 2 annoying teammates, and maybe get a small bite to eat. His teacher nodded slowly. It is probably the village of Roishimori. There shouldn't be another village for another couple of miles or so. Naruto gave a little jump, a blinding smile slapped onto his whiskered face. Alright, let's go and see if they've got any food, he yelled at the top of his lungs. Sakura growled under her breath as she watched the blonde make his way down the trail. I'm going to kill him, she muttered. Sasuke just rolled his eyes and was about to follow his most annoying comrade when something hit him. A feeling, for a split second, like someone was about to throw a kunai at him. And then it hit, right where Naruto was about to step out onto the clearing. An arrow. Gah! Naruto screeched, and jumped back, a stupid look etched on his overly expressive face. Sakura stared in shock, frozen on the spot, but Sasuke got into a stance and whipped out a kunai. He glanced around, senses alert. There was a very faint chakra signature nearby, perhaps a deer's or rabbit's. So they were cloaking their chakra. Not good. He glanced towards his sensei. Andy's sensei wasn't moving. His nose was still buried in that insufferable book of his. You're kidding me, right? Sasuke thought, but held little hope on that matter. There was a movement up ahead, and Ravenet focused back on them. Naruto, who had quickly regained himself, took out his own weapon and faced the oncoming foe. Just what the hell was that about? He screamed. I could ask you the same thing, idiot. The voice was not what he expected. A human form jumped out from a tree near the side of the clearing. Two furious dark blue eyes gazed at them while arms wrapped in tan sleeves crossed in front of the girl. Her long black hair swung back and forth in the breeze and her angered expression scrunched up the light dust of freckles on her. There was a bow and quiver of arrows strapped across her back. Wah! Naruto spluttered, his eyes narrowing down and mouth curling into a snarl. You're the one who shot at me. The girl scoffed. Well, of course I did. She swung her hand out in an arch towards the other end of the clearing. You just scared off my target. Sasuke watched as the last of a herd of deer pranced on into the woods, then glanced back at the fuming girl before them. He assumed she was hunting them. The deer, was hard to believe, looking at her unnaturally pale features and delicate build. She was taller than him, and perhaps a year older, but she didn't look like a hunter. Never. Someone who would want to hurt them. Oh, Naruto said dumbly as he watched the deer, before glancing back at the girl. Sorry. The stranger closed her eyes and took a deep breath, reminding Sasuke of his teacher when he was trying to deal with his genin team. That was when Sakura decided to, say something smart. Wait, how do we know she's not the one we are after? Okay, maybe not that smart. Oh yeah, Naruto cried out and glared at the girl. Who are you anyways? Already deeming the stranger as not an immediate threat, Sasuke pocketed his kunai and watched as the Ravenet smashed her forehead into her hand. It's alright, Naruto, Sakura. She's one of the villagers. The voice of their sensei caught everyone's attention. He had walked forwards and had plucked the arrow from the ground, now spinning it between his fingers. This arrow is from a Roishimori hunter. He stopped spinning the object and pointed at the feathers that decorated the end of the arrow. They were uniquely designed, beautiful blue color and smooth curve to them. The hunters in Roishimori use the feathers of the phony phoenix, a bird who has a bright blue coloring that gives it the ill of being on fire. Naruto looked confused. Sakura seemed interested. Sasuke was just bored. The girl on the other hand peeked up in interest. She narrowed her eyes and focused on their sensei's forehead before letting out a small gasp in surprise. You are the ninja from the Hidden Leaf Village, right? Kakashi's eye crinkled happily as he walked forwards and handed the girl her arrow. That would be us. I'm Kakashi Hatake and these are my students, Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, and Sasuke Uchiha. Slipping the arrow into her quiver, the girl nodded before closing her eyes and smiling gently. It's nice to meet you. I'm Kanako Hata, next lead huntress and chief of Roishimori. Sasuke couldn't stop his eyes from widening slightly. This kid is the next chief of the village. He thought to himself in slight disbelief. Naruto didn't even try to hide his surprise. Ha! He exclaimed and stuck his face right in front of the girl, who leaned back in concern. You don't look like a princess. Kanako chuckled and stepped away from the blonde boy. I'm not really a princess. My father's the leader of our village, and since we are on the outskirts of Fire Country, we need a leader or else we would have no way to commune with other higher leaders. I'm his eldest child, so the responsibility will fall on my shoulders eventually. She then began to walk towards the direction of the thin trail of SM. That wavered in the sky. Come, I'll take you to dad right now. Naruto grinned then bolted after her, the incident with the arrow seemingly forgotten. Sasuke swore he heard the knucklehead ask Kanako about food. With a heavy sigh, he began to follow. Chief Hata was a kind fellow. When Kanako had brought them to her home, he had welcomed them with open arms. Truth be told though, Sasuke was expecting something more. The house was very lodge-like, with the traditional screens and such, but it was smaller and more humble. There were a couple horned skulls on the wall, but even they did the friendly spirit exhibited by the family. Mrs. Hata was a woman of beautiful features eerily reminding Sasuke of his mother, but in a different sense. She carried around a small bundle who was Kanako's young brother. She had a sister as well and it seemed as if she and Naruto hit off, even if the brunette was about 7 years old. When the family had laid out the table with food, Naruto had dug in without so much as a word. Yet even as Sakura ratted him out for it, the Hadas just chuckled or smiled. Struck up ideal conversations with Team 7, and Sasuke couldn't help but feel less annoyed when Kanako asked him a question. She let him do the talking and he appreciated, even if he didn't say much. But by the end of the dinner, the Ravenet had had enough. The atmosphere was too warm, too friendly and familiar. Quietly excusing himself, Sasuke went outside and looked around the area. The trees stretched far to the north, northwest, and east. To the south, the rest of the village are lamps flickering in the dim light of the setting sun. The house was placed on a taller hill, and Sasuke began to make his way down to a small target he saw set up. It had as if someone had practiced quite frequently. It will have to do, he thought. Then he walked to the other end of the field and flung a kunai. Training was something Sasuke found that helped calm him down. The repeated motion of throwing and even the memorized moves of katas helped him control his emotio. Rid his mind of disturbing thoughts. So it was easy to get lost in. And therefore, Sasuke didn't sense the approaching figure until she spoke. Didn't think my targets were good for kunai practice. The Uchiha almost killed the chief's daughter on the spot. Don't sneak up on me. He hissed, pocketing his drawn weapon with a scowl. I didn't think I could sneak up on a ninja, she stated, genuinely confused. Anyways, how do you do that? Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Do what? He asked a little hesitantly. The kunai throwing stuff. His shoulders slumped. All hopes of her being normal or lost. She was much too eager and uninformed. This was going to be a bore. You just throw. She scoffed. You're right. And to shoot an arrow you just aim and shoot. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Shooting a bow is not that hard. Anyone can do it. Kanako's eyes narrowed and it sent a shiver down his spine. The way she looked at him was cold, but calculated. It gave him almost a sense of déjà vu. Fine. Then the Ravenet pulled an arrow from her quiver and shot it at the target behind him without so much as a flinch. And Sasuke hardly blinked. His dark hair waved in the wind, his right lock noticeable shorter than his left one. Kanako smirked before holding out her bow and a single arrow. Now, you try. Hit my arrow. Sasuke carefully took the weapon before turning towards the target. The arrow the girl had shot was right in the middle and the two were standing about 7 meters away. And she had told him to hit her arrow. Sasuke bit his lip before knocking his arrow and taking aim. While his hands were steady, the tip of the arrow didn't seem to want to line up with the end of the girl's arrow. A hiss, he let his arrow fly and then watched as it hit the target. Right beside the first arrow. They were so close that they touched, not a single space between the two wooden shafts. But, close, very close, Kanako said from beside him. But not quiet. She then took the weapon from his hands and pulled out another arrow. With a soft breath, she raised her bow and took aim. There was a moment of silence, as if even the wind fell quiet. Then the arrow was released. Obsidian eyes grew wide and Sasuke stared in utter disbelief. Kanako's arrow had split his own straight down the middle. It was unreal. How? The Ravenet in question smiled and stuck out the tip of her tongue. Guess everyone can shoot a bow. Just can't hit the mark. Then she turned around and began to head back to the house. Although, you are really impressive with your kunai. I wouldn't mind learning from you. Then she left, leaving Sasuke to simmer in his anger, shock and awe. The following morning, Team 7 settled down in a meeting with the chief to discuss their mission. It wasn't very nice. Naruto's eye twitched as he listened to the details of the bandit. It was only one guy. One guy who terrorized this village along with many others. One guy who no one has caught before. Were these people serious? So what are you saying? Kakashi-sensei began. Is that this bandit only shows up once every month? Yes. The chief replied. He ransacks our homes and even takes one of our women. He has requirements that must be filled and if we do not meet them. At this the Ma shuddered. He is ruthless and smart. And I can't deny that he has us dancing in the palm of his hand. Kakashi-sensei nodded before tilting his head to the side. So then, if this has been going on for quite some time, why call out for help now? Chief Hada sighed, seemingly in defeat. Because I and the rest of the village have finally gotten desperate. Just recently, about a few days before your arrival, my dear friend lost his wife to the bandit. She was, by many of the villagers, and frankly, other than my wife, she was the only medic in our settlement. But that is not all. The bandit has finally made a demand that none can uphold. Chief Hada looked Team 7's leader in the eye. He wants Kanako. Naruto blinked. Sasuke stiffened. And Sakura let out a small gasp. We are unsure of what the bandit does with our women, but the things we presume should never be bestowed upon a child, even someone as mentally mature as my doe. Not to mention, she is the heir to the village and a successful huntress. Losing her would not only break our hearts, but would strike a powerful blow against our resilience. There is resilience at all. Now the chief looked desperate. A pleading look glowing in his eyes. Please, I ask you. Get rid of this bandit, the shadow pirate, so that my people don't have to lose anything or anyone else. And, please, protect Kanako. Kakashi gave a single, confident nod. We will, chief. Do not worry. Thank you. The man replied graciously. And since you now have to wait a month till the bandit appears once again, feel free to use the woods for any training purposes. Although, Kanako will be hunting from time to time, so just stay to the west side of the village. Naruto decided to drown out the rest. It was just aimless talk. But when Kakashi-sensei called for them to go, he jumped up with much vigor. While the bandit still sounded, the blonde was eager to get some training done. Team 7 made their way to a certain spot in the woods, careful not to pass over to the east side of the house. They began their training, simple chakra exercises to warm you. Whatnot. Of course, Kaka-sensei immediately took out his damn orange book, which both Naruto and Sakura protested against. Stupid Sasuke just stood there looking emotionless. It was then that sensei announced a challenge. If all of you make it standing upside down on this tree branch while simultaneously performing a jutsu of your choice, then I'll put the book down for the rest of our missio. Naruto gaped, and from the corner of his eye, he saw Sakura do the same. That was almost too good to be true. Even Sasuke looked surprised, before he scoffed. You better not mess this up, Naruto. The blonde felt his blood boil. Oh yeah, he cried, stomping right up to the ravenet, a scowl harshly etched on his whiskered face. Well, you better not mess this up either. Naruto. Sasuke isn't going to mess anything up. If it were to be anybody, it would be you. Naruto grimaced. Now even Sakura was taking Sasuke's side. Settle down. Do you really want to fight in front of an audience? Kakashi-sensei interrupted with a sigh. Wait, what? The silver-haired man hopped down from his spot on the tree and looked to one of the many bushes. Alright, you can come on out. And then, to Naruto's utter surprise, Kanako stepped out from the woods. She gave a small hesitant wave, looking every bit like Konohamaru caught doing something he wasn't supposed to. Huh, the blonde yelled, pointing an accusing finger at her. How did you do that? I didn't even sense you there. And by the looks on Sakura's and Sasuke's faces, they didn't either. It gave Naruto a huge sense of satisfaction. Kanako has actually been following us for quite some time. Sensei supplied. In fact, I didn't even notice her presence till a few minutes before reaching our destination. He then turned to her, pocketing his book. Which is rather impressive. Not only did you manage to hide her chakra signature from us, but you also managed to track us down within very little time. The girl fiddled with the end of her sleeve, a faint blush on her cheeks. Well, it is sort of like hunting. Then she pointed at the three genin. Not to mention they were rather loud. Naruto could tell that he wasn't the only one who felt attacked. Whatever. He said before narrowing his eyes at her. But why were you following us anyways? Kanako smiled sheepishly. I just wanted to see you guys train. Then her eyes lit up. Plus, you guys know how to fight. You guys have a chance against the shadow pirate. Naruto blinked. He could stop the sort of pride that welled up in his chest. Well, of course they stood a chance against the shadow pirate bandit person. They were shinobi. And? Kakashi-sensei questioned, although not harshly or accusingly. Kanako looked at the ground a little guilty. And I was hoping I could pick some things up, she muttered quietly. She wanted to learn from them. Well, Naruto would gladly teach her. No problem, he announced, and was thrilled by the amazed look on the girl's face. I can teach you everything I know. Chakra manipulation, taijutsu, and even my secret ultimate move. Naruto. You can't go teaching people the way of the shinobi from outside the village. The blonde boy spun towards Sasuke and got right up in his face. Oh yeah, says who? The Hokage. Sakura butted in, although less aggressively. So, at least she wants to learn. And if she could track us and stay under our radar as easily as she did, then shouldn't she get at least a chance? And honestly, Naruto Kanako was a nice person. And she wanted to protect her family and village. Why couldn't she learn from them? Well, the single word from his sensei shut the three genin up. Kakashi looked thoughtful. It is against the rules, but Naruto does have a point. He turned to Kanako. Yo. Demonstrated ability. Not to mention, having someone with a higher combat strength in the village could prove useful to you. Then the silver-haired man fell silent. See me. Think. Before coming to a conclusion. Very well. We will teach you the basics of becoming a shinobi. In fact, we can place this as a training for you lot as well. The three genin blinked. You will each teach Kanako a topic. Chakra manipulation, taijutsu, setting of traps, or something else. Your goal is to have her be able to perform the subject you teach. A month. Alright, Naruto exclaimed, before rushing towards the ravenet. Come one, I'm going to teach you my ultimate move. Trust me, it's the best thing you'll learn. Then H grabbed her arm and began to drag her towards the trees. When they reached a clearer spot in the woods, the Jinchuriki turned towards the huntress. Great, now my ultimate move is the multi-shadow clone jutsu, but for now we'll get you to make just one shadow clone. So, first, you gotta gather your chakra. Naruto. The blonde looked back at Blue Eyes emitting confusion. What's chakra? Eyebrow twitching, Naruto gazed at the girl in disbelief before it hit him. She was a citizen. From outside the hidden villages. Oh boy, he thought exasperatedly. Kakashi sighed. Course Naruto would run off without thinking twice. But instead of going after him, he would learn that Kanako needed more introduction into the life and skills of a shin. Before performing that jutsu, he turned to his two remaining students. Any plans what you two will teach her? Sakura looked thoughtful. I was thinking about teaching her the basics of chakra manipulation as well as more theory stuff. Kakashi nodded. That sounded within Sakura's skill level. Then he turned to Sasuke. I guess I could teach her to use shinobi tools. That works too. Well then, I'll be focusing on taijutsu, that should cover most of it. Sensei. Sakura asked hesitantly. Do you really think this is a good idea? Kakashi hummed. True, Kanako was an outsider, but it couldn't hurt to teach her a few skills, right? So he simply nodded. The first time Sakura taught Kanako, it was different. They were currently seated beside a creek with the Pinkett going over the basics from the academy. Kanako listened, sitting silently and calmly. Her demeanor, while less bored and arrogant, somewhat reminded Sakura of Sasuke. Although she was nicer. Things were going great, until a boar rushed out from the underbush. It seemed to be terrified of something and it didn't care where it was going. The girls, caught completely off guard, dove to the side, then watched as the pig made its way. The creek and into the woods. What the heck was that about? Sakura growled under her breath as she got up. She scowled as she noted the state of not only her dress, but her left knee. Great, she hissed, but was distracted by movement from Kanako. The Pinkett suddenly got really nervous. If anything happened to the ravenet, well, Sakura probably would be able to forgive herself. To her relief, Kanako looked perfectly fine. Instead, she made her way over and got on her knees. She reached forwards and trailed her fingers beside Sakura's wound. Furrowing her brow, she looked deep in concentration. This doesn't look too good. It's filled with dirt. She looked up at Sakura. Why don't you take a seat on the rock? I'll just grab some stuff real quick. And then she left. Off into the woods. What just happened? The genin thought to herself before shaking her head and sitting down on the appointed rock. In a few minutes, Kanako returned, her arms filled different leaves. She put one of the leafy things in her mouth and began to chew while cupping water from the river and trickling it over Sakura's wound. It stung, but only bit. Then Kanako spat on it. Ew. The Pinkett cried out in disgust and tried to jerk her leg away from the girl, but Kanako held it tight. Calm down, it's just a salve. It's to protect from infection. Then she continued to smear it around on the wound before bandaging it up. There we go. the Ravenet announced happily, helping Sakura to her feet. The small injury didn't hurt anymore, in fact, Sakura could hardly feel it. Thanks, she said. What exactly did you use? Kanako picked up one of the leaves, a bluish fuzz coating it. Mist plants. They protect against infection and even numb the area they are applied on. They also get their name from their misty appearance. The Ryoshimori air ants. But anyways, while I should probably pack these up since I've already picked them, I can still listen to what you were telling me earlier. That's right. She still had a lesson to teach. Sakura settled down on the rock once again and continued her lecture. 2 weeks had passed and Kanako had diligently kept up her lessons besides going on the hunt for her village's food and such. 2 weeks and Sasuke was beginning to understand why his teacher always brought a book to their meetings. Teaching was infuriating. Whoops. Kanako grimaced as she bit her lip in an apologetic way. Apology was not accepted. Sasuke scowled as he ripped the kunai out from beside his head, right bang even shorter than before thanks to the girl's foolish mistake. The target, he hissed, is in the opposite direction. Kanako had the grace to look guilty. I'm aware, but I'm just not used to attacking with kunai from a distance. After 2 weeks, the Ravenet had learned and managed to hold up in a fight simply using 2 kunai, and even hit the targets on stationary boards. Having her hit a mauve target though seemed to be more than a challenge. You just aimed at where the target was going to be, then you threw the kunai. How hard could it be? Very hard, apparently. Try again. The Uchiha ordered with a scowl. And this time, don't try to take my head off. Plus, he added after a second thought. You won't even stand a chance at hitting. Until you can hit moving targets. Kanako nodded, looking a bit miffed at his attitude, before turning back to her marks. The quiet of the woods was alluring and Sasuke had just settled down against his tree for another grueling session when a joyful shout yanked him out of his small escape. Haha, I did it! Kanako cried out and the boy turned his eyes on the 3 targets. They were still swinging from the tree, but this time they all had a kunai implanted on. True, it was not Bulu's eye but. Good, now try to hit the center of all 3. Kanako shot him a small look of annoyance before shaking her head with a sigh. Whatever you say. And as she proceeded to practice, Sasuke settled back at his tree. And if he kept one eye open, that was up to him alone. Kakashi couldn't help but chuckle to himself as he watched the young girl, hardly older than his genin, flop onto her back breathing hard. She really did try, and while the C of the exercise was simple, carrying it out was difficult. After learning a couple basic katas, stances and so on, he quickly moved her onto more aerobic training, requiring movement and application of the techniques they have been through. They had about 3 days left before the arrival of the Shadow Pirate and Kanako had shown except skill. She was heavily skilled with weapons and her fighting ability was growing quickly. The application of chakra took a little longer, but once she got a hold of it by giving a hard attack from the top of the tree, she started grasping concepts and actions much faster. Pity she wasn't from the village. She would make an excellent shinobi. Alright now, try again, Kakashi said and was rewarded with a soft groan. He hardly raised an eyebrow by the time the girl stumbled to her feet. She proceeded to whip his cheek, which was bruised by a falling branch before settling down in a neat stance. Okay, she huffed. I'm ready. With a shrug, the silverette cut the rob pulled taut nearby and the course began. The task was to first dodge all the falling kunai, dulled and blunt just to be safe, avoid the swinging logs while blocking some shrunken before using the stones on the sma. To hop over the water and finally attacking none other than Kakashi himself. Kanako had made it as far as the logs before getting knocked down constantly. As before, she managed to dodge the kunai and quickly moved onto the logs. The first and second were easy, the shuriken coming at different intervals, but the third log have Kanako dodging it while blocking the shuriken at the same time. Kakashi had set this bit up specifically so that there would be only one way to make it through and to time the execution perfectly. Eventually, she would be able to pull it off, that was a definite. But not this time. With a thump and an oof, Kanako was thrown through the air and landed in the same pile of flattened bushes as for the last 5 times. This made number 6. She got up with a groan and narrowed her eyes at the offending log. Kakashi simply kept quiet watching as she slowly built another strategy in her mind. Hopefully she won't. At this time, because there was only one rope left and he was not setting it up again until tomorrow. Kanako grunted, seeming to make up her mind and pushed herself to her feet before getting into position. You good? Kakashi asked and the girl nodded sharply in response. She seemed pretty determined. This time, I'm gonna do it. She mumbled and took out 2 kunai. With a small sigh, the Jonin cut the last rope. As before, Kanako flew through the kunai her hunter's eye and built up reflexes giving her the edge. She dodged the first 2 logs a little differently, hopping over one, beef. Rolling under the other. That was when things changed. Instead of trying to continue under the log or simply leaping over, Kanako placed a single hand on the log and flipped into the air. She twists upside down before rotating and placing her weapons in front of her in an X shape, successfully blocking the shuriken and landing on the other side. Not perfect grace but didn't matter. It was still impressive. Did not see that coming. Kakashi muttered to himself. With a wicked grin, Kanako continued, she hopped over the rocks with ease and before the silverette knew it she was right in front of him. She swung and he stepped back. Kicked and he moved. They did this for a little while before she kicked again and he grabbed her ankle and swung her over his shoulder. But when he turned around, Instia, floundering on the floor, she was right there, fist nearly completely extended. It seems she caught herself and had nuanced back. The fist connected with his side briefly. Enough to do damage but enough to send a whoosh of air around them. After a moment of silence, Kanako looked up with a grin that rivaled Naruto's and pulled back her hand. I did it. She cried happily. Kakashi, after blinking off the initial surprise, just smiled and patted her on the hand bringing her energetic bouncing to a halt. That you did. Well done. Kaneko blinked at him from under his hand before growing. Oi, don't do that. She grumbled getting out from under his touch. Ma, but it messes up your hair. With it's a neat all the time even after an exercise like that it's only fair it gets a little messy. Really? No. I'm just enjoying teasing you. With a yell Kanako stomped her foot and turned around, arms crossed. Bastard, she mumbled. Kakashi chuckled before gathering himself. Come on, let's go take a break and then I can evaluate your other classes. If you do well, I may just deem you passable for our little course. Kanako perked up at this, much like a curious puppy and began to follow him. Do you think I'll be able to take on the shadow pirate like this? She asked hesitantly. Kakashi simply sighed. I wouldn't go looking for him, but I do think you would stand some chance. Maybe not win, but you could hold your own for a little while. But don't get me wrong. He looked her in the eyes that glimmered with innocence and hope. Eyes that should never be burdened with the act of taking under human's life. Breaking the circle of give and return. That precious balance these people hand with the nature around them. Running is still your best option. Naruto sighed quietly to himself as he slipped on his pack and made his way towards the Hada's front door. The month was up. The shadow pirate would show up soon and he was absolutely destroyed, which Naruto would have no problem doing. They would go back to the village. Without Kanako. Which was not fair at all. She put so much effort into her training and was actually really good. So what if she wasn't part of the village? She was still awesome. She has a duty to her village. Not to mention she made the choice. There is nothing we can do. Stupid sensei. That had been the lamest excuse ever. What's wrong with you, Dobi? Asked Sasuke and Naruto could hardly resist the urge to punch him, but Sakura was there so he had to. Oh shut up, but for your information it's about Kanako. Oh, Sakura began a dangerous teasing lilt in her voice. Does someone have a little crush? No way. The blonde quickly yelled. I mean she's nice and all but I don't think of her that way. It's just, she's worked so hard. I really think she could have made a Griya. Shinobi you know. At this, Sakura looked rather sad. Oh, she said and lowered her pretty green eyes to the ground. You're right, she would. Sasuke scoffed quietly but even he looked a little remorseful. Cheer up guys. The joyful shout made all 3 of them jump. Kanako smiled at them, her big blue eyes glistening with pride. I learned a lot, and now I can use what I've learned to help my village safe. I can always visit too. Kakashi walked up behind her and pocketed his orange book. The rest of the Hada family stood behind him as well. Kanako's baby brother rested in his mother's arms while youngest, Jira, hid behind the chief. We want to thank you for all the help you have provided us with. The chief said, bowing in respect and gratitude, along with offering some training for Kanako. It was no problem at all, replied Kakashi-sensei, waving off the thanks. We will finish up our mission tonight so that your village may be safe. May good fortune be with you. Mrs. Hata spoke softly, a warm smile on her kind face. Kanako grinned with a small hint of sadness in her eyes. Next time you guys see me, I'll be sure to beat you in everything you taught me. Then she looked at Sensei. W. Of you except you, Mr. Kakashi. Sensei chuckled quietly to himself. Well, you are smart enough to figure things out. I'm sure you'll come a long way. Then the silver-haired Jonin turned towards the three genin. Alright, let's move out. And Naruto, looking back at the Hata family, gave a huge smile and his signature thumbs up. You can count on us. He cried before following his teammates. But as he hopped through the woods, he couldn't help but wonder why Kanako had looked so utterly frightened. Kanako bolted upright, cold sweat breaking out on her forehead as the thunder echoed through the night and the lightning flashed blindingly. The feeling pulling in her gut, pulsing behind her left eye. It was the same feeling she felt when Naruto had thrown his bright smile and loud exclamation before he left. That feeling of doom. Over the past month, Kanako had built a bond with the four shinobi and she could feel that something was wrong. Or was going to be. The shadow pirate was no joke and she had no doubt in their abilities. The lightning flashed again and in that split millisecond Kanako saw it. It was as if she was there, standing in a clearing and watching as the shinobi dressed in black tore throat of her white-haired teacher, the bodies of her friends fallen around in pools of blood. Then the millisecond was over. And Kanako was out the door. With simply her day-to-day outfit on, she didn't have the howling wind hold her back, poncho left at the front door. She had the kunai in her hand that was given to her by and her family's heirloom handband given to the oldest child of each generation. Something bad was about to happen. So Kanako ran. She ran as quickly as she could, stumbling down the path, slipping on mud while whipping rain from her eyes. She couldn't be too late. She got the feeling and it was strong, meaning it was earlier just in time. But she was going to make it. She had to. With another alerting pang in her gut, Kanako changed courses and took a sharp turn to the right and into the underbrush. She wasn't going to let that damn pirate take anything else from her. And that was when she arrived in the clearing. Sasuke breathed heavily as the man in the long black cloak and the grinning mask that covered only his mouth and nose stood over him. This was not how it was supposed to go. The sudden spike of chakra had come out of nowhere and the spinning staff had caught their sensei off guard, catching him in the side. The staff itself had blades on either. And the resulting wound dripped with heavy red liquid. Everything went downhill from there. In a rage, Naruto had launched himself at the shadow pirate only to get flung aside with ease. Sakura tried her best, which wasn't much in Sasuke's opinion, but she was overpowered with a cut to her ankle. Sasuke himself did much better, and when Naruto joined the fray they slowly began making progress, confusing the nuke nin with Sha clones, substitutions and a barrage of shuriken. But all that progress was for naught when with a few hand signs, the shadow pirate summoned a horse, yes horse, of Ms. sending them tumbling backwards. By then, Kakashi had staunched his bleeding somewhat and had launched his own attack. The fight quickly turned up in severity as two shinobi began a battle of jutsus. The water from the rain merged with each kaiden, creating a misty drape that reminded Sasuke all too much of their trip in water counter. Genius Mind quickly made connections with each of his teacher's attacks, making note of how he refrained from using any lightning-based moves. It was far too dangerous with all the water around them. But during an attack from the silvered hair ninja, the shadow pirate cast another jutsu and melted into, as his name would suggest, the shadows. And Sensei, being injured, couldn't dodge in time. The kunai seemed to appear out of thin air, and it was with a small twitch that it missed the large artery in the thigh. But with a new wound, too. Leg of all places, Kakashi was incapacitated. So in a last-ditch effort, Sasuke streaked forwards and forced the bandit away from his teacher. But in no time at all, the man in black was upon him. Insolent fool. He hissed with a raspy voice before bringing a short jab down on the ravenette's neck. With a choked sound, Sasuke felt as his body went numb and he unable to move a single limb. Naruto lay in much the same situation as him on the other side of the clearing while Sakura tried to get to her feet. Sensei's breaths came ragged and wet as he watched. The shadow pirate, Sharingan gleaming a blood-red color. So this is the villagers' reaction to my orders, the man hissed, amusement lacing his voice. Pathetic. He lifted his spear and pointed it straight at Kakashi's face, an insane gleam in his eye. Now die. Then, in a blink of an eye, a kunai shot past the man's cheek, nicking him in the process. Everything stopped. Everything froze. No one moved. No one breathed. The only thing that remained was the pattering of rain as it pelted the group in its endless fury. The little cut trickled blood onto the ground, mixing with the water. With a confused expression, the shadow pirate turned around and laid his eyes on the young girl stand. The edge of the clearing. Kanako, Sasuke hissed under his breath. What was she doing here? She was supposed to be back at her village. Oh, the silver-haired man questioned. The village chief's daughter. Seems you have delivered yourself on a silver platter. He turned around completely and began to wah. Her directions. Little that will do your friends or your village. You broke our contract. As if I give a damn. The Ravenette launched herself towards the pirate, streaking towards him like a blur. Her fist shot out, nearly connecting with the man's stomach, but he leapt back in time. Was a little surprising how far she had come in the course of a month. Unbelievable even. And as she lunged after the pirate, albeit not completely graceful, Sasuke couldn't. Thinking through his panicked thoughts that there was something very strange about Kanako. In a good way. The young girl struck out again, but instead of backing away, the Rouge Nin kicked the girl in the ribs and sent her tumbling across the ground. But it seemed getting beat every day for the past month by none other than the copy Nin himself had its perks. She quickly righted herself and was in the nuke Nin's face once again. This went on for another minute until the shadow pirate seemed to have enough. He grabbed Kanako by her long hair, earning himself a yelp of pain, and used it to slam her face first into ground. This time, she didn't get back up. I'll deal with you later, you pathetic worm, he hissed before letting her go. Your friends die first. The man picked up his staff and turned back to Kakashi. All Sasuke could do was watch. He couldn't move. He couldn't fight. And Kakashi-sensei was going to. The near silent word just barely made it to the Uchiha's ears, and surprisingly, the pirates as well. Kanako struggled to push herself to her feet, knuckles white as her. Gripped her kunai. Won't let you. Finally standing, Kanako looked up. Sasuke once again stopped breathing. It wasn't possible. Her left eye. It spun with 4 tamos, an hourglass shape connecting them as blood trickled down from her socket. A Sharingan. I'll kill you. Kanako breathed heavily as the pain in her eye reached an ear-splitting crescendo. It hurt. It hurt so much. But she had to keep going. Her friends, her teacher, her village. Had to fight. Fight for them. Get up. Kanako pushed her hand under her shoulder. Get up. She made it to her knees. Get up. She gripped her kunai as if her life depended on it. Get up. She stood up. Save them. Her eye felt like it had burst and she could feel her blood mixing with the rain on her face. She looked up and everything made sense. She watched as the fear in the pirate's eyes flickered awake briefly, before she lifted her leg, and was right in front of him. He blinked for a second, and through the red vision of her left eye, Kanako watched as a similar silhouette of him dodged to the right. So that was where she aimed. And the shadow pirate dodged to the right. Her kunai slashed across his nose, drawing blood that was as red as her sight. From there on, every move the man was about to make, Kanako saw, and she was their beef. Even knew what he was going to do. Damn you. He rasped out and swung with his staff, but as it hit her, Kanako let out a grunt before disappearing in a puff of smoke, thanking Naruto silently for his shadow technique, which, as he reminded her constantly, she wasn't supposed to know, but he didn't care. Watching the dark-cladded individual, the Hada smirked. The man looked around for a second before glancing up. Kanako planted her kunai in his throat. The look on the shadow pirate's face ingrained itself in her memory. Fear, pain, horror, death. Die. She hissed and ripped her weapon out. He was dead before he hit the ground. Kanako landed, feet planting down gracefully, hardly splashing the tainted water. She stopped, blinked, and then the fatigue and pain hit her like a truck. The last thing Kanako heard before passing out was the startled shout of her raven-haired friend. When Kanako woke up, it was to sunlight filtering through the trees and the sound of little birds singing. She blinked, trying to recall as to why she was out in the woods. And why was her left eye blind? She tried to sit up, a sudden bout of panic gripping her heart when a pang of pain shot through her body. A hand helped ease her into a more comfortable sitting position. Held her head. Easy there. You're safe now, Kanako. That voice. It was familiar, very much so. She looked up, having to twist even more, so that she could see out of her right eye. Kaka. Sensei kneeled next to her, looking rather concerned and somewhat relieved. What happened? She asked, glancing around. Sakura was on her other side, worry brimming in her green eyes. What happened? Naruto exclaimed, and Kanako noticed he stood directly in front of her, no regard for personal space. You whipped that guy's butt, that's what happened. Had a cheerful grin plastered on his whiskered face, looking every bit like a child on Christmas morning. Sasuke stood beside him and shot the blonde a disapproving glare. You also almost died. Just what were you thinking? He growled, but the small hint of concern that sparked in his tone was not missed by the ravenet. Instead, she blinked, looked towards the adult of the group, hoping he would provide her with a clearer answer. Kakashi sighed deeply, closing his lone gray eye. You went up against the shadow pirate. Oh, that's right. Everything came back with a sudden clarity, and Kanako wasn't sure how to deal with the large information dump. She killed someone. And while killing was not something she killed, a person. Went outside her village's teachings and customs. The life she had taken would never be returned. The circle had been broken. It had been a lesson taught to all the children of Roishimori. Hunting was their way of living, their primary food source, and as the next lead hunter, Kanako had that lesson drilled into her mind. Life was like a circle, a never-ending chain reaction. The deer ate the grass, you killed and ate the deer, and then you die and your body becomes fert for the grass which the deer eats. You give what you take, and that is that. Killing another human would result in the circle being broken. A life would be lost, stolen from th world. And life was precious. Sakura placed a hand on her shoulder as she swayed a little. But it's okay, Kanako. She tried to reassure. You're safe now. Kanako spoke up. Killed. Him. The group fell silent and took a moment to process what she said. The man beside her took a deep breath. Yes. You did. He said, and Kanako, no matter how horrified she was at this news, was thankful that he didn't sugarcoat it. But, the silver-haired Junin continued. If you hadn't, he would have killed us. And then destroyed your village. The man slipped his hand into her hair, patting the top head in a similar gesture. You did well. She did well, even though someone was now dead because of her. But, Kanako questioned frantically, blue eyes widening at the older shinobi beside her. I killed someone. Sometimes you must make sacrifices in order to keep what you hold dear safe. The Ravant's breath hitched at her teacher's words. He was right. If she hadn't killed that man, then. Are you all alright? She asked hesitantly, fiddling with her hands. Sakura smiled. Naruto grinned. Kakashi chuckled, while Sasuke just grunted and looked away. Yeah, we are. The pink-haired girl replied. But next time you pull something like this, I will hit you. She shouted out of the blue, fist clenched to emphasize her warning. Ka nodded quickly. Noted. She replied. Speaking of which, the fact that the Uchiha actually spoke up should have been a bad sign on its own. Your eye. At this, Kanako reached up and felt the piece of cloth tied around her head. It was damp where her left eye was, and as she sniffed, the smell of blood reached her nose. Don't worry, it's still there. The Junin mentioned at the sight of. The young girl's fear. Just different. Kanako looked at him, still confused, but it was Sasuke who replied. Somehow. Don't ask me how, you have a dojutsu that only my clan has been known to possess. The Sharingan. His eyes narrowed down, but instead of anger it looked like curiosity. How do you have it? Kanako shrugged. Absolutely no idea. Hey. Sakura jumped in, snapping her fingers. Maybe your parents know. Possible. Came the girl's reply. Then Naruto placed his hands on his hips and scowled. Oi, she just came out of a fight and killed someone. Stop interrogating her, Sasuke. Don't tell me what to do, Dobie. The blonde growled and looked ready to brawl when the silverette raised his voice. Alright, that's enough, came the order from Kakashi. Naruto is right, Kanako just went through a pretty hard ordeal. Even for shinobi who are raised from a young age to professionals, the first kill can be rather jarring. He turned to the girl. Can you stand? Kanako furrowed her brow and tried to push herself up. It didn't go well. She quickly found herself being picked up and placed on the man's back. There you go, he said and stood up straighter. Let's get you home. At his eye smile, Kanako couldn't help but grin back. Hi sensei, she answered with a joyful tone. Naruto cackled beside them and placed his hands behind his head. But no matter what you think about killing, you were pretty awesome out there, Kanako. Yup, Sakura agreed, long pink hair which had no right to be so pretty, swishing behind her. I didn't think you would be able to pull off a clone though, much less fool as. Like that so well. You both moved so fast. Well, Kanako began as the five of them started heading towards her village. After the pain in my eye, I could see things. Like the wisps of the shadow pirate before he It was almost like I could tell his next move before he could. Sasuke hummed thoughtfully. That doesn't sound like the Sharingan. Wait, you mean that's not normal? Kanako asked, a bit nervous. No, it's not. But I assume someone from your family will be able to answer our questions surrounding this strange power of yours. Kakashi reassured her. Although, its and appearance is very similar to the Uchiha's dojutsu, so it's likely that it is some variant form. Of course, for there to be a variant form, there had to have been an origin. Hopefully things will be cleared up in the near future. The future? Kanako mused. That's right. What is? Sakura asked, looking every bit as curious as she sounded. It's how I found you guys or why I even left my house in the first place, she explained. It's something that happens to me often, especially when a large event is coming. Get these flashes of actions or images that sometimes piece together. Almost like a warning. This time it was pretty gruesome. She shuddered at the memory, shaking as if it would get rid of it and wrapping her arms a little tighter around the shinobi carrying her. Perhaps that was the power of your eye. Kakashi supplied. Even dormant, it provided you with some unusual abilities. But then, why would it wake up now? Most likely it's due to the extreme stress you faced. Sasuke added. Since negative or painful emotions can awaken the Sharingan, it's possible that your fear of the Vizio saw coming true was akin to these serious emotions. I don't understand a thing you guys are talking about. Naruto frowned, looking very, very confused. No one asked you, Naruto. Sakura bit back. So why don't you keep up with the conversation? The blonde yelped. Sasuke rolled his eyes while their sensei shook his head in amusement. And Kanako? Kanako laughed. Your task is to steal these bells. Kanako tilted her head in confusion at the man before her. The shinobi held up a pair of silver bells. This wasn't what she was expecting on her first time training with the J. But she was guessing there was some sort of trick. Okay, she said after a moment of hesitance. The man smiled and flicked his hand into a seal. A duplicate of him appeared in a puff of smoke before it poofed into an appearance. The duplicate was now slightly shorter with mousy brown hair and a pair of hazel eyes. The few freckles that were visible peeked out from behind the mask covered their nose and mouth. Simple clothes consisting of a green military vest and some black cargo pants made the duplicate look kind and simplistic. Since the others have already done this test, they won't be allowed to participate. Kakashi explained. Thus you will be training with a clone. Although it's not preferable. Only option at the moment. Kanako nodded in an understanding. Right, you have till noon, which should be 3 hours for one of you to get both bells. If you don't, you will have no lunch. And remember, you won't succeed unless you at me with the intent to kill. Then he disappeared into the woods. He knows I can forage, right? Kanako asked no one in particular, so it came to her as quite the shock when the clone replied. He'll most likely string you from the trees so you can't go anywhere. The brown eyes glistened with a sort of mirth that seemed both playful and a little sadistic. That is, if you don't get both bells. Kanako frowned. The clone was likely made to be her opponent here, with both of them aiming for 2 bells. She would need to think outside the box for this one. Alright then. and she ran into the trees, quickly scurrying up the trunk of one. The clone went in the opposite direction. Kanako settled down to think. She would probably to pull this off with one shot, otherwise Kakashi would incapacitate her and then it was game over. She couldn't pull off a proper shadow clone yet, just more of an illusion. Sakura's theory, while useful, wouldn't actually help her in this situation. So all she had was ninja tools and she doubted a simple shuriken and wire trick was going to Katsi. More experienced Junin off guard. Unfortunately, while she was smart, no plan came to mind that would rely on her skills. Then a thought struck her. The clone, it or he, probably had some more skills in his arsenal. Although, they weren't supposed to be working together. Wait, Kakashi hadn't said that specifically. An idea hit her hard. With a new resolve, she climbed higher and looked around. Now, how to find the clone? There was an explosion from her right. That was easy, she thought to herself, before quickly making her way over. Upon arriving, she saw the clone leap into the trees and away from the man standing in the mid. Another clearing. Oi, she called out in a whisper shout and carefully settled down beside him. He asked in all too familiar fashion. Seemed shadow clones couldn't change one's personality. Look, I figured something out. She explained quickly, eyes trained on the shinobi, reading a book. And? The clone asked. He never told us we were against each other. Brown eyes blinked in surprise at her statement, carefully cataloging what her actions and words were. Kanako turned to him, determination evident in her features. No matter how good you are, you're just his clone. But together, he won't expect a thing. We could actually take him down. The brunette blinked, before slowly nodding. Good. Then what are your skill sets? Kanako asked. The following execution of the task was done with near perfection. The clone, surprisingly, didn't not wield any ninjutsu, but had a very nice collection of paper bombs Kanako decided to use to the fullest. They worked on setting up a trap inside a trap to get the Junin to assume he had guessed their plan, but when he moves to throw he would fall into the real plan. The clone set off the paper bombs which they had placed around the field, creating a screen of debris and smoke. Then, he set himself up, to appear as if he were Kanako, making his way through the screen. From there on, it was up to the actual Kanako to keep an eye on the silver-haired man, watching where he was about to go. If she me this up, there, he flickered for a moment and appeared behind the clone. The ravenet wasted no time and shot out from the underbrush, staying low to the ground. It was the surprise of the clone poofing out of existence as Kakashi hit it that allowed Kanako to swoop in and wrap her fingers around the bells. Both of them stopped. You, the man began. You managed to get the bells. Kanako blinked, before quickly straightening up. Yup, see, they're right here, she exclaimed, holding up the bells in one hand. And now they're here. The girl watched as her teacher held up his own hand, silver bells dangling from between in his fingers. Her head snapped back to her own appendage. Huuuuh. The bells were gone. She whipped around to the man who smiled innocently at her. How did you do that? Kakashi simply chuckled. That's a lesson for another day. His lone eye opened and watched her inquiringly. But could you tell what today's lesson was? Kanako furrowed her brow, the previous surprise seemingly forgotten. Teamwork, she tried, taking a wild guess. Exactly. Her mentor replied, a proud gleam in his eye. To be honest with you, you're probably the first student to have figured it out so early on. Tell me, what gave it a? You didn't tell me and your clone that we had to work against each other, she said with a grin. You simply said, you, which could have been either addressing us individu as a whole. Kakashi walked over and patted Kanako on the head. The hell, what was that for? She asked, trying to smooth down her hair. Ma, just a simple show of parental affection, what else? But I have parents. Then think of it as family. Kanako frowned, thoughtfully. Okay. After that, they settled down beneath a tree and her teacher surprised her by pulling out 2 bento boxes. When asked where he had acquired them from, he simply smiled. Said something along the lines of, the walks of life. Kanako. He addressed the ravenet and she perked up, mouth filled with food. There's a rule I have taught to my students after having it taught to me by a friend. Kanako looked on expectantly. Those who break the rules are scum. But those who abandon their friends are even worse than scum. He looked towards the girl. Remember that. The words hit home. Kanako blinked. The phrase, it was strong. She couldn't explain the feeling, but don't worry, I will. Kakashi regarded the couple before him with a pointed look. They were being unreasonable. After returning with Kanako, injured and being carried by yours truly, Mr. and Mrs. Hata had nearly gone into hysterics. But after getting all of themselves attended to by tea, older woman and sending the young kids to Kanako's bedroom to rest, Kakashi began the long process of explaining what exactly happened. It's safe to say, the two did it well. You mean to say, that after hiring you and your team, my daughter was nearly killed by that bandit? The silver-haired shinobi took a deep breath, steeling himself. He nearly killed all of us. If it hadn't been for Kanako, there is a much higher likeliness that we would have died. But my daughter killed the shadow pirate and saved our lives. Kakashi finished, and this time, the man shut up. With another tired sigh, the younger individual turned his eye onto the Onel woman at the table. During the fight, Kanako unlocked a certain power. At this, the dark-haired woman's eye widened slightly, and while her husband didn't notice, Kakashi sure did. What kind of power? The man asked, obviously not believing him. A special jutsu, only seen in the Uchiha clan. A clan that has been whipped out for the last 6 or so years. He tilted his head to the side. I'm assuming, Mrs. Hata here answer our questions about this. Both men's attention was turned onto the lady, and she took a deep breath, pale hands fiddling with her necklace. You are more perceptive than I thought, Kakashi Hatake, she said slowly. Kanako indeed possesses a certain gene that will allow her to unlock the Sharingan. Although, never thought she would, since it has been dormant in my family for the past 4 generations. My great-great-great-grandmother was a member of the Uchiha clan. She, the second eldest daughter of the clan leader, and was born with a mutation in her dojutsu. Because of this mutation, she was frowned upon, since the clan was not aware. Full prowess. She was to be married off to a man she did not care for, but she had fallen in love with someone else. So she ran away from her village and ended up here. Then, she vowed never to teach her descendants this power and hopefully have it completely whipped out for reasons that have been lost to me. She looked to her husband. I'm sorry I never told you all of this, but I didn't think it would be important. After all, the dojutsu should have never been awoken, especially in Kanako. The woman sadly. She is such a kind-hearted girl. I could never have dreamed that she would go through enough to unlock the Sharingan. The three sat in silence, each contemplating the new bout of information with varying expressions. Mr. Hata looked shocked. Kakashi seemed to prepare himself for the woe. While Mrs. Hata appeared sheepish. The Junin began. Is going to be a problem. The couple snapped their heads towards him so quickly, Kakashi swore they would break their necks. What kind of problem? Mr. Hata asked, trying his hardest to hide the shakiness of his voice. Kanako has developed a powerful dojutsu and with it, successfully marked herself as a target. The moment a rogue nin, another ninja village or even a greedy leader gets about it, they will come after your daughter. Mrs. Hata looked positively horrified. Then she can't use her eye, that's simply it. The chief said, pretending to relax, but his tense shoulders spoke otherwise. Kakashi sighed. It seemed he was doing that a lot right now. Unfortunately, that won't be a possibility. On the way back, Kanako explained to my team and I that she has had so-called visions ever since she was younger, this being likely a result of her hidden power. With her eye now activated, these visions could become more frequent and thus have a large chance of being discovered by ill-wishers result in painful experiences. Simply activating her dojutsu for the first time caused extensive bleeding from her eye socket. It's unknown what could happen if left unattended to. Then what do you suggest we do? The other man asked, a sharp accusation and protectiveness in his tone. Kakashi took one more deep breath. Send her to the Leaf Village. Absolutely not. Surprisingly, it was Mrs. Hata who objected so suddenly, and when the silver-haired shinobi looked at her, he could tell exactly why she would be an Uchiha descendant. Eyes flared with anger, and if she had the Sharingan, it would have been spinning furiously and gleaming red as blood. I will not send my daughter to a place that will turn her into a murderer. By all means, Mrs. Hada, if you consider killing people who are killers murdering, then your daughter is already a murderer. The woman shook, obviously trying to find an excuse, but Kakashi continued, not giving her time to speak. Not to mention, the village will provide both protection and training for your daughter's eye. Along with that, my students and I have been teaching her for the past month. All of us have been surprised with her progress. Even my most roundy student has pointed out that she would make an exceptional ninja. The skills she would learn would invaluable, and with the potential she has, she could go very far. And how do we know that you and your village wouldn't use her as a weapon? Kakashi looked the man in the eye. I would never let that happen. He made sure to channel just enough determination into his statement that the Hada couple knew he wasn't kidding around. Mrs. Hada scowled. She'll get herself killed. I will make sure she doesn't. Why are you pushing this so much? That's right, why was he? Kakashi thought. It wasn't the fact that their village could do with another strong shinobi. Or that the girl knew some of the skills taught in the academy, those would hardly make a dent. He thought back to the training, the way Kanako had seemed alive. The way she looked when he told her the most important of all, the utter strength and determination in her eyes. Why indeed? It's because Kanako has the will of fire, came his reply, earning a small flinch of surprise from his audience. The will of what? Mr. Hada asked. The will of fire. Something that is found within every shinobi in Konoha. While it cannot be explained in specifics, it's what connects us to our dreams, our passions, and another. It's not something given, it's something you are born with and nurture. From what I could tell, even after only a month, the fire within Kanako is strong. Stronger many others I have seen before. The couple looked slack. Aye, the chief tried, but could find no excuse. Mrs. Hada seemed to have swallowed a lemon. There was a tense silence before. Fine. Mrs. Hada spat. But on one condition. She leveled the copy nin with a stare that burned like flames, and if glares could kill, he would have been stabbed, cut up and drowned at least 10 times. Kanako will fall. Your teachings, and you will promise me that you will protect her. Kakashi nodded. With my life. While not seeming pleased, Mrs. Hada looked at least a little reassured, and so she stood up. Then I'll go get her things ready. And then she left. The shinobi sighed and looked over at the chief, who simply hung his head and smiled weakly. Kakashi took this as his leave and headed towards the young girl's bedroom, intending to collect his students. With the new addition. Damn that woman, sacred him. Come dear, let me see please. Kanako hesitated for a second, before cracking open her left eye. It still hurt greatly, but it was manageable. Somewhat. The colors and lights still stung, and, as she turned gaze fully on her mother, she noticed the flickering shapes, as if ghosts, of her mother's future actions. It was greatly disorienting, and she quickly snapped her eyes shut. I can't. She whispered. Her mother, with no anger at all, reached forwards and cupped her daughter's face in her hands. I am so sorry, my child. You should never have been handed this burden. Kanako smiled, looking at her mother through her right eye. No, mother, I'm glad I have it. If I didn't, those people, my friends, would have all perished. When she looked at her mother again, it came as a shock to see her calm, gentle facade. Cry, Mom, but the dark-haired woman wrapped the girl in a life-threatening embrace. Oh, my poor girl. I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. She repeated over and over again, sobs racking her petite frame. Kanako, at first too surprised to do much, wrapped her AR around her mother and buried her face into her chest. Here she felt safe, warm, and happy. So why was she feeling a sense of dread pooling in the pit of her stomach? I love you so much, baby girl. I love you, I love you. Her mother leaned back, sniffling, her smile gentle but sad. My little princess, please, promise me you will be safe. What was her mother talking about? Of course she would be safe. Why was she acting like? Kanako blinked. The shinobi from the village have decided to take you along with them. Oh, so that was where the dread was coming from. She was leaving. But slowly, that feeling of foreboding began to shift. It spun round and round, burned her veins and lit up her senses. Hope. She felt. Hope. Don't cry, mother. I will try my best. Mrs. Hada closed her eyes, fingers dancing over the bandages on her daughter's face as she slowly began to unwrap. Them completely. These will get in the way, she said quietly. Here. She replaced the stained materials with an eye patch, its black color matching the locks of hair that spilled around it. It should be easier to remove when. You need it. The woman nearly broke down into tears again but resolved to run her fingers through her daughter's tresses. Please. Kanako. The girl met her mother's frantic gaze. Ask them to let you stay. If you do, then they won't take you. Please, Kanako. The Ravenet watched, eye wide. Her mother, the woman who brought her into this world, the woman she would give her life to protect, the woman who has loved her for past 13.5 years. How could she say no to this one simple wish? But it wasn't that simple. I'm sorry, mother. I can't. Mrs. Hada sobbed once more and seemed to accept her fate. She dropped her hands and bowed her head. Go, put these on. They're waiting for you downstairs. She mumbled, voice broken. Kanako felt a tear slip from injured eye and took the pack of clothes her mother had placed beside her. She stood up, slowly, and made her way towards the door. Stop. I want to go, mother, she said, voice loud in the silent room. I want to become stronger. I can become stronger. Kanako turned around and looked down at her mother. Shaking form. I will become stronger. So strong that I will be able to protect everyone I love and care about. I'll make sure that nothing will happen to this land as what happened in this village. I will protect what I love and hold dear. She took a deep breath. And I assure you, you will not regret this choice. Her mother's head snapped up, black eyes wide and wet as she looked at Kanako. The Ravenet smiled, a confident smirk on her face before she nodded and walked out door. It didn't miss her mother's notice that she had been slowly crying as well. Kanako regarded the jacket with a neutral look. The clothes her mother had given her fit a little big, most likely a future present, but since she wouldn't be around for that occasion, they were given to her now. The dark gray pants fit loosely, allowing for movement and flexibility while her shin-length boots held her ankles secure. The tan show sleeve had nothing special about it, but was thrown up by the leather belt and buckle that went across it horizontally from her left shoulder to her right hip. On top of it all, had a dark blue jacket reaching her mid-back and housing a high color. She decided to roll it up just beneath her elbows, the rest of her arms being covered in some banda. Since she still had some wounds from her fight. Maybe she would keep them. You look great, Sakura proclaimed, tilting her head to the side. But something is missing. The pink-haired Kunoichi pulled out a black pouch and some more bandages. Here. She said. I had Sasuke pack some ninja tools in here. You strap it onto your leg. Kanako, having seen all four ninja have one, nodded and proceeded to tie the bandages to her left thigh before clipping on the holster. You're left-handed? Sakura asked as she finished. Kanako looked up. No, I'm actually ambidextrous. Broke my right arm once and had to learn to do everything with my left for 6 weeks. Guess it stuck. Lucky. The pinkett exclaimed. Why? Well, if you lose control over one arm, you can still have proficient use over the other, since both are dominant for you. Gives you an edge over your opponents. The Ravenet nodded. Made sense. She followed the other girl over to her teammates and was met with an excited yell from Naruto and a grunt from Sasuke. Hey Kanako. You look awesome. All that's missing is your headband. The blonde exclaimed and got up in the girl's face, no regard for personal space. Get a grip, Naruto. Sakura shouted and punched the poor boy in the face, sending him approximately 3 meters away. Oh, Sakura. He whined in distress. I was only complimenting her. Sakura growled and the boy flinched as she tightened her fist. It's okay, Sakura, really. Kanako said, trying to calm her friend. Oh, alright. The girl replied and, surprisingly, settled down. Are we all done here? Not hearing anyone approach from behind, Kanako jolted in surprise, biting her tongue to keep in her shriek. Oh, sensei. Naruto called and hopped to his feet. Kanako's coming with us. Yes, I know. The man's eye twinkled and it seemed he. Noticed Kanako's surprise. She blushed in embarrassment. Ninja. You're right. Don't worry, we'll work on it. He said in a lower voice, only letting her hear, to which she was thankful for. She hummed in reply. The sound of the door opening caught the Group's attention. Mr. and Mrs. Hada stood in the doorway with their two remaining children looking much like they did when the original four were about to leave. The only difference was that Kanako stood beside the ones actually leaving. Her mother didn't meet her eyes and instead kept her dark orbs trained on the silver-haired man with such anger that Kanako was partially expecting him to burst into flame. Her dad seemed more relaxed, but after spending years training to hunt with him, Kanako could tell he was tense. Little Riko was there, curled up in his mother's arms but glared at Kanako from behind her mother, dark eyes burning with hate. No, it was something else. Something Kanako couldn't put her finger on. Something glistened under her little sister's eyes. Was she crying? Then Jira disappeared. Her mother looked down a little concerned but turned back to the group just as quickly. She watched Kakashi for a moment. Make sure you keep your promise, she said, authority and strength coating her voice. The shinobi nodded his head, before looking at the chief. Thank you for your hospitality. Our mission is now complete and we will return to our village. Hopefully, we will meet again on better terms. Mr. Hada nodded. We appreciate your help greatly. He looked at Kanako. You'll do great things, Kanako. Remember that. The Ravenet, not trusting her voice, shook her head in agreement. Well, then, Kakashi smiled. We best be off then. Okay, bye, Naruto exclaimed before shooting off at a running start. Sasuke and Sakura followed at a slower pace, but Kakashi waited as Kanako stood before her family. She hesitantly made her way over, not once taking her eyes off the pay. Gathered to wish her off. Jiro was still peeking out from behind her mother, hands gripping her skirt. With a shaky lip Kanako looked up at them, making sure to make direct eye contact with her mother. I love you all. And I'll make you proud. Just you watch. Then she spun around, clearly intent on turning. The silver-haired shinobi shook his head in amusement and followed after her. After a while, they caught up with the other three, who waited for them at the start of the forest. Naruto, in all his whiskered glory, grinned widely. Sakura smiled and even Sasuke had the corner of mouth twitch upwards. Kakashi ruffled the Ravant's hair once again, resulting in a twitch from the girl. Well Kanako. Welcome to Team 7.